Thank you for joining us, guys. We're Team 11, and we will be presenting our talk on how microplastics are impacting global ecosystems. Watermelon. So, who are we? Like I just said, we are Team 11, or the Turtles. Just on this slide, you can see each of our names as well as what we will be speaking of, respectively. So, let's start with Arya.
Hello, my name is Adia Kirthakoti, and today I'll be talking to you about what microplastics are and where they are found. Here's a fun fact about me. I am a second degree black belt in karate.
Hello everyone, I'm Rafaela, and today I'll be covering the impact of microplastics on land and marine ecosystems. And the fun fact about me is that I really like computer programming.
Hi everyone, my name is Baptista Ezra. I'm from Indonesia, by the way, and I will be covering human health risk and examples that stood out or studies insofar about microplastics. The fun fact about me is that I almost like any genre of music. I can switch from hard rock to jazz at any given moment. So yeah, hopefully you enjoy this webinar.
And I am Christian. I'll be finishing up the presentation with solutions and future actions in regards to microplastics. My interesting fact is that I've been playing guitar for about a decade and a half now. And you may have noticed by this old thing that my microphone's attached to that I enjoy recording music from time to time as well. So, watermelon.
So, what are microplastics? Microplastics are very small pieces of plastic that are less than 5 millimeters in size. To put that into perspectives, they are smaller than a grain of rice. Because of their tiny size, many microplastics are difficult to see without a microscope. They are considered part of a larger environmental issue called plastic pollution. Microplastics are made from common types of plastic or synthetic polymers, the same materials used to make everyday items like plastic bags, containers, packaging. Even though the materials are common, the small size of microplastics makes them very unique. There are two main types of microplastics: primary and secondary. Primary microplastics are plastics that are intentionally made to be very small. These include things like microbeads, which are once used in products like face scrubs or toothpaste. Another example is tiny fibers that come from synthetic clothing, such as polyester or nylon, especially when clothes are washed. Secondary microplastics are formed when larger plastic items break down over time. This breakdown happens because of environmental factors like sunlight, especially UV radiation, as well as weathering and physical forces like wind and water. Instead of fully decomposing like natural materials, plastics simply break into smaller and smaller pieces. Microplastics can also come in different shapes depending on how they are formed. Some appear as small fragments, while others look like fibers, tiny beads, or thin films. These differences depend on the original plastic material and the way it breaks down. Watermelon. Before we dive into the topic, let's see what you already know. Microplastics are extremely small pieces of plastic, and scientists are still discovering all the places that they can end up. Based on what you know at the moment, where do you think microplastics are found? You can type them into the chat. I'm seeing a lot of E's. And you would be right if you said E. Watermelon? Microplastics are present in many different parts of the environment, including water, air, land, food, and even inside the human body. They are widespread because plastic breaks down easily into smaller pieces and can be carried long distances. Starting with water, microplastics are commonly found in oceans and rivers. Larger plastic waste in these environments slowly breaks down into tiny particles, which then spread throughout the water. They are also found in air. Microplastics can become airborne and exist in indoor dust as well as in the atmosphere. This means that they can travel through the air and settle in different locations, even far from where they originally came from. On land, microplastics are present in soil and on farms. They can come from sources like degraded plastic materials or waste, and they can mix into the ground over time. Microplastics have also been found in food. For example, They can be present in seafood and crops. This happens when microplastics enter the environment and are taken in by organisms or absorbed from the contaminated soil and water. In addition, microplastics have been detected in humans. Scientists have found them in places like our blood and our lungs, showing that these tiny particles can enter the human body. Finally, microplastics have even been discovered in more unexpected places, such as glaciers and clouds. This shows how easily they can spread across the planet, even to remote or extreme environments. Overall, microplastics are found in almost every single ecosystem, across the water, land, living organisms, and even in places we might not expect, making it a pressing issue for all of us. Watermelon.
Moving on to marine ecosystems. In marine environments, the problem starts at the bottom of the food chain. Microplastics are ingested by plankton and other small organisms, and from there they bioaccumulate, which means that they build up in concentration as you move up each trophic level, reaching fish, seabirds, and marine mammals. Microplastics have now been found in over 700 marine species, and in some ocean regions, up to 80 to 90% of sampled fish contain microplastics. Watermelon. When marine animals ingest microplastics, the physical effects are severe. They cause gut blockage, reduced feeding, and tissue damage, which then lead to reduced growth, reduced reproduction, and reduced survival rates. To put numbers to this, fish exposed to microplastics show up to a 50% reduction in feeding activity, and in laboratory studies, larval fish survival dropped by up to 40% when exposed to microplastics. Watermelon. Beyond the physical damage, microplastics are also chemical carriers. They can carry pollutants at concentrations up to 1 million times higher than the surrounding seawater. So when an animal ingests a microplastic particle, it's also ingesting a concentrated amount of toxic chemicals. These chemicals cause inflammation, neurotoxicity, and reproductive damage. A well-documented example is BPA, which is a chemical that disrupts hormones and has been shown to reduce egg production in zooplankton by 30 to 50%. Watermelon. The effect of all this damage is the weakening of overall ecosystem stability and biodiversity. Marine algae, which produce over half of the world's oxygen, have their photosynthesis reduced by up to 30% when exposed to microplastics. If algae can't photosynthesize properly, the entire marine food web is undermined. Coral reefs are another alarming example. Reefs exposed to plastic are up to 20 times more likely to develop disease. Reefs support approximately 25% of all marine species, so their decline has a negative effect on biodiversity that extends beyond the reef itself. Watermelon. Now moving on to land ecosystems. Microplastics are now widespread in soils and agricultural land, and something that people don't really realize is that agricultural soils may contain 4 to 23 times more microplastics than oceans. And for plants, microplastics can reduce growth and photosynthesis by up to 20% and interfere with nutrient uptake, which has serious implications for agriculture and food security. Watermelon. In the soil, microplastics directly harm earthworms, which are essential for breaking down organic matter. And they show up to a 23% reduction in reproduction when exposed to microplastics. They also lose weight, which weakens the entire soil food web. Insects, like beetles, are affected in a similar way, with reduced survival rates and reproduction rates, which threaten pollination and the food chains that depend on them. Moving up the food chain, microplastics have been found in the digestive systems of over 50 land bird species, accumulating in their liver and kidneys, causing inflammation and reduced egg production. And finally, for smaller mammals, studies show that microplastics cross the gut barrier and accumulate in organs including the brain. And cattle grazing on agricultural land ingest microplastics directly through soil and plants. Watermelon.
Okay, so here's our question. Can microplastic affects our health? as a human? Let me know your answer in the chat box. Okay, okay. So the general claim by the experts is that because they have been detected in human bodies, especially organ systems, even breast milk, hormones, and body tissues, which are vital to our survivability, and it basically those are the organs that run our bodies. And when it's contaminated by microplastics, it leads to potential diseases. Mostly, thus far, based on the research, is it will damage reproductive, digestive, and respiratory health. For example, the University of Carolina recently conducted a research that shows pregnant women who have been contaminated by microplastics or been exposed to will reduce the baby's testicle size development, which of course in turn in the future will lowering the sperm productivity in the babies. So it is an intergenerational issues because it does not only affect the mother host, but also affects the babies who are born, which in a condition where they cannot perform in terms of their physical progress, in terms of physical productivity as productive as though compared to those who have not been affected. These are the examples of standout studies. If you guys want to check it out, we collect some of the studies from that examine the impact of microplastics on marine, land, and human health. If you pay attention to these three researches, you can draw the red line in which that microplastics cannot be underestimated. They are multi-biological threat because because the animal in the seas they cannot differ between real food and microplastics, in which it will disrupt the feeding and it will damage their tissues, their organs, and alter their genetics, leading to the demise of these animals. And on land, it takes 100 times. It takes 100 years for these microplastics to be degenerated, and during those periods, it will alter the structure of the soil, thereby reducing the fertility, and it disrupts the plant pollinators, in which, of course, lowering the productivity of the plants, in which, of course, it becomes the source of food for most of the animals. And of course, they contaminate nutrient-based animals, which of course consumed by the carnivores and the humans as well. As for the health effects, it mostly the research agree that they cause oxidative stress, which leads to propellant respiratory system workflow, leading to worsened health conditions. But for the human health specifically, they agree that it requires more extensive research to examine the direct correlation between microplastics and human health conditions, which are in a worsening situation in modern days. Watermelon.
Before we move on to solutions and future actions, I have a question for you guys. What solutions would you think would be beneficial in solving issues with in regards to microplastics? I'll give you a bit of time to put that in the chat first before we move on. Any ideas? I'll give it about 10, 15 more seconds. Yep. Did you come up with anything, Francesco? Reducing use of single use? Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So both great suggestions. Watermelon. So the solutions that we have found in our research are there's three of them. Oh, there were more than three, but I've narrowed it down to three of them that I think are the most interesting and useful. Um, So reducing single-use plastic, absolutely. Same with stricter regulation. But the ones that we've presented are eco bricks, sea bins, and water filtration. Water filtration is probably the least sexy of the three. Eco bricks is about taking single-use plastics, like you've mentioned there, Francesco, taking any sort of plastic containers and basically just shoving the plastic containers full of any plastic refuse, litter, any of that sort of stuff. And it means that you're reducing the amount of plastic that's ending up in landfills or in ended up dumped in oceans, any of that sort of thing. And it's instead being used as low-cost construction materials for communities that perhaps can't afford traditional construction materials. So it means that they still get shelter, they get accommodation at a lower cost that's much more accessible to them. And it also means that you're reducing the amount of plastic in the environment. The second solution, sea bins. Now, this is primarily an Australian initiative in Sydney, as it says there, but in 2023 alone, they were able to remove 22 tons of plastic from the harbour. And if this is scaled up, you can imagine that it would um, be quite beneficial quite quickly. And the final one, water filtration. Over time, technological advancements just allows water filtration to remove any sort of microplastics and any similar sort of debris from entering the water systems before it becomes a problem. Now, experts do have some concerns, especially around those first two, about the scalability. So, sea bins can also catch marine organisms from time to time, and they're not as useful as manual nets. However, the thing is, manual nets and sea bins can be used in conjunction. Sea bins just operate on their own until they need to be emptied, and manual nets can still at the same time be used. And eco bricks, there are concerns about over time microplastic release in those secondary microplastics, like Adia mentioned in her section. Watermelon. Moving on to future actions, it's pretty much what you would expect, what you guys have suggested already, reducing the amount of plastic produced and reducing the amount of it used. If those are both done and policies are implemented to that effect, then we can see reductions in use of plastic up to 96% by 2040. Unfortunately, as it is currently, between 2000 and 2019, we've actually seen a doubling in the amount of plastic used and produced. And if we continue on the same trajectory, we're seeing an increase of up to 70% increase in plastics produced and used and um, released into inappropriate places by 2040. If we cut down on production and demand, if we enhance our recycling, and if we close the leakage pathways to uh, the environmental contamination, then we can see those, and then those reductions. Then finally, if we design products to shed less, such as tires, textiles, and paints, as well as things such as asphalt, which isn't mentioned there. So, for example, asphalt uses rubber in its construction in some types of mix, and then rainwater comes in, it washes out that rubber into and plastic into the soil, which then contaminates the soil and can lead to groundwater runoff, contaminating water sources as well. If we do all of these things mentioned here, we can see big reductions. Thanks for watching, guys, and we do still have a quiz to go. Watermelon. Ezra, do you want to share the he's bringing it up now. Perfect.
Okay, so to freshen up your memory about the learning materials tonight, guys, we want you guys to leave after leaving this webinar, you can remember the good stuff, the important stuff about microplastics as well. So yeah, feel free to access the Kahoot first in your own devices, and as soon as you guys join, we can start immediately. Okay, we got Julia, Zach, Fra, Chris. Okay, so I believe that's everyone here in. Okay, I think we should start the quiz now. Okay, microplastic quiz session. Are you ready, guys? Hope everyone's ready. Okay, which traits define microplastics? These are pretty easy. It's in the first slides of the webinar tonight. And the answer goes to tiny. It's not small because it's smaller than the word small itself. It's very indigestible to human body and to animals and plants as well. And well, it's always plastics, thus the name microplastics. And it's mostly found and always found in industrial processing. Okay, on to the next question. Okay, let's see first the scoreboard. Julia. Wow. Uh, Congratulations, Julia. For the others, catching up. Okay, take the place of the Julia, I guess, if that's necessary. Okay, which is the type of microplastics? Primary, hard, plastics, liquid. I believe Adia it was her part for this explanation. Okay, two answers. One. Okay. Well, the ho- the traits, hard plastics and liquids, those are the characteristic of microplastics, but mostly they are divided into two categories, primary and secondary. Okay. Wow, Zach is taking Julia's place. It's getting more competitive. Okay, on to the next question. Microplastics are suspected to cause. Okay, I guess there's a one answer that is certainly not the answer. It's pretty easy. Okay, that's your guys' reproductive issue. Just a reminder, stroke, heart attack, they are mostly assumptions, but research that shows the correlation are declaring the suspicion that microplastics that contaminate human bodies would possibly lead to reproductive issue because they are found in hormones as well. Okay, the scoreboard. Zach is leading in this podium. Okay. Now, microplastics exposure could alter soil structure. These are true and false questions, guys. So, yeah. Okay, that's true. It takes 100 years for microplastics to be broken down, and during those periods, it changed the structure of the soil, and mostly they reduce the fertility of the soil. This will lead to less healthy plant growth in the soil itself. Okay, let's see the scoreboard. All right, Zach is still leading. Chris on the second part, but Chris is on fire, everyone. Okay, now this is the final question, guys. Multi-select questions. Do you believe microplastics could be converted into something useful? Okay, we have one answer maybe and three answer yes. Although it's still debatable, but it is highly recommended that there are solutions to overcome the microplastics issue in our environment. And one way to do that is to recycling, reuse and reduce and etc. But mostly, hopefully in the future, microplastics can be turned into something useful in order for people to be more, in order to give the incentive to people to, so that people will be more encouraged to join in the movement to overcome this problem. And yeah, that's the quiz. Now let's take a look at the podium and who's winning on this quiz. Okay, number two, Chris, and look at number one. Look who we have. Ah, Zach. Congratulations, Zach. But for Chris and Julia, Fear not, you still take the good part in these quizzes, and hopefully for everyone else who's not on the podium on the first, second, or third places, um, you guys are still learning, and I hope you can leave this webinar by taking the most important takeaways about microplastics. I'm handing it over to Christian. That's all for the quiz Kahoot tonight, or Melbourne.
Thank you very much, guys, for watching our presentation. We have unfortunately run overtime a little bit, but we've still got about 4 minutes that we can answer any questions that you guys might have. Feel free to hop on a microphone if you've got one, or type it in chat, whichever one's easier for you. Anything that surprised us? Um, to be honest, I was really keen on doing this topic because I did a very similar presentation last year for university. So I was pretty well prepared for my section at least. But what about you guys? Was there anything that surprised any of the rest of you?
Nothing surprising, I would say, but yeah, I don't think there's anything surprising. I was also interested in the topic from the beginning, so I was always interested.
Yeah. Well, for me, it was a bit surprising because I didn't know that microplastic is that dangerous. I mean, I live in Indonesia, and here plastics are everywhere. So yeah, at first I didn't read this task, this webinar. Now I know, okay, this is pretty urgent.
Yeah, and also say nothing really surprising since there's lots of awareness about it in school.
And then uh, Christina's also asked about solutions to get rid of microplastics. She's read somewhere that there are worms that are able to break down and eat plastic. They're still at testing phase though. That's news to me. That sounds really interesting. I wonder, Raf, did you come across that at all when you had effects on worms?
No, I didn't come across this solution, but it sounds really interesting and it could be really efficient if they decide to implement it.
Anything else, guys? If there's not, then thank you very much, everyone, for joining in. Um, I know that some of you guys still have your presentations to go, so I look forward to seeing those. And unless there's anything any of the rest of my team wants to say, then thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you all for joining.
Thank you very much. Thank
Thank
you for
you.
joining us. Thank you for joining us.